The day they took me to jail, the sky was so blue, it felt like mockery. I remember the weight of the handcuffs on my wrists, cold like the fear running down my spine. Neighbors came out to their doors, whispering as I walked by, escorted by 2 police officers. Me, Evelyn Johnson, the woman who'd never missed Sunday service at Greater Hope Baptist Church, who embroidered altar cloths and sang in the choir, now being led away like a criminal through the streets of the neighborhood where I was born. "Thief!" someone called out, and that word stabbed my heart like a knife. I couldn't look anyone in the eye. I felt shame burning my cheeks as we passed the bakery, where I bought bread every morning, past the corner store where they'd let me put things on my tab when money was tight. Now, sitting in this rocking chair, my wrinkled hands caressing my great-granddaughter's head as she sleeps in my lap, I can tell this story. Nearly 50 years have passed, but the memory is still as vivid as the purple hydrangeas growing in my garden. I'm telling you this because it's time for the truth to come out before these old hands can no longer caress children's heads. It all began in the south side of Chicago, where I was born to the sound of gospel music from the church down the street. I was the third of 7 children, daughter of a factory worker who labored with more love than fortune. My mother, may she rest in peace, was a God-fearing woman who taught us to pray before we could talk. Our apartment was small but clean, with a fire escape where we grew tomatoes and collard greens in buckets, and where Mama hung her prized geraniums that she tended like another child. My childhood passed between games with my siblings, helping Mama in the kitchen, and attending the neighborhood school. My teacher, Ms. Washington, told me I had a good head for numbers, that I could become somebody in life. But in those times, for a black girl from the South Side, becoming somebody usually meant finding a good husband who didn't drink too much and worked enough to keep food on the table. At 15, during the church's summer revival, I met Marcus. He was 20, worked at the steel mill, and had the most beautiful eyes I had ever seen. We danced all night at the community center afterward. My mama watched from across the room, but I only had eyes for Marcus, his smile, the way he looked at me like I was the only woman in the world. "You're gonna be my wife," he told me that night, and I believed him. 3 months later, we married in the church. I wore a simple white dress that my mother and aunties had sewn with so much love that every stitch felt like a blessing. Marcus took me to live in a small apartment on the west side. We didn't have much, but we were full of dreams. The first year was like living in a fairy tale. Marcus worked hard. I took care of our home, and soon I was pregnant with our first son, Michael. When I placed him in Marcus's arms, I saw tears in his eyes. "Now we're a complete family," he said, kissing my forehead. But life has cruel ways of changing fairy tales. The steel mill where Marcus worked started laying off workers. He held on longer than many, but one Tuesday in November, he came home with a lost look in his eyes. "It's over, Evie," he said, using the nickname only he used. "The mill is closing. There's no more work." We tried to stay afloat. Marcus looked for work every day. I took in laundry, but the money wasn't enough. By then, our second child, Sarah, had been born, and I was pregnant with our third. Bills piled up like autumn leaves. One night I found Marcus drinking in the dark kitchen. He'd never been a drinking man, so I was scared. "I can't provide for my family," he said, his voice breaking. "What kind of man am I?" I tried to comfort him, to tell him we'd find a solution together, but something had broken inside him. He started drinking more, coming home late sometimes, not coming home at all. The money he earned from odd jobs went to whiskey and gambling. I prayed every night, asking for a miracle, lighting candles at church, but miracles didn't come. Our third child, David, was born during a storm so fierce I thought the roof of our small apartment would cave in. Marcus wasn't there. The midwife helped me while I bit down on a cloth to keep from screaming in pain. 3 small children, a husband who had become a shadow of the man I'd known, and me, increasingly desperate. The neighbors looked at me with pity. Some helped with food, others offered work washing or ironing, but it was never enough. One afternoon, as I walked through the market with David in my arms and the other 2 children clinging to my skirt, I saw Mr. Thompson, the grocery store owner, counting money in his back room. The door was ajar, and he didn't see me. It was so much money, more than I'd seen together in my life. I thought about my children, their empty stomachs, their sad eyes that no longer asked for toys but only for food. Something broke inside me that day. It wasn't a decision. It was like someone else took control of my body. That night, after putting the children to bed, I told them not to leave the house for any reason. I left them the little cornbread that the neighbor had given us and promised that when I returned, there would be more food. I covered myself with a dark scarf and walked to Mr. Thompson's store. It was late. The streets were deserted. My heart was beating so hard I thought it would be heard all over the neighborhood. The store was closed, but I knew Mr. Thompson lived in the back. I also knew there was a window that didn't close properly, because I'd once seen him try to fix it without much success. I slipped in through that window, moving like a cat in the darkness. I found the box where I'd seen the money. I didn't want to be greedy. I only took enough to buy food for a month and pay some of our debts. I told myself I would return it, that it was just a loan that Mr. Thompson would never notice. But when I was about to leave, I heard a noise. Mr. Thompson was there, looking at me with bulging eyes. "Thief!" he shouted and tried to stop me. In the struggle, he fell and hit his head against the counter. He lay motionless on the floor, a thread of blood running from his temple. I ran, terrified, with the money clutched to my chest. That night I didn't sleep, waiting for the police to arrive at any moment. But they didn't come. The next day, the whole neighborhood talked about how Mr. Thompson had been robbed, how the thief had hit him. Mr. Thompson was alive, thank God, but he had seen his attacker. For a week I lived with my heart in my throat. I bought food for my children, paid some debts, always looking over my shoulder. Marcus didn't even notice that suddenly we had food to eat. He was too lost in his own world of misery. It was the neighbor, Mrs. Jackson, who betrayed me. She saw me buying meat, something we couldn't afford for months. "Where'd you get the money, Evelyn?" she asked suspiciously. I made up a story about an aunt who had helped us, but she didn't believe me. The following Sunday, while I was at church, I felt all eyes on me. Reverend Wilson preached about theft, about how God saw all our sins. I felt he was speaking directly to me. After the service, as I was leaving the church, the police were waiting for me. And so, I found myself walking through the streets of the neighborhood, handcuffed, humiliated, with the cry of "Thief!" following me like a curse. The last thing I saw before they put me in the police car were my children, standing at the door of our apartment, with tears running down their cheeks, not understanding why they were taking their mother away. That was the first time I set foot in a jail, but it wouldn't be the last. What I didn't know then was that my life had just taken a turn I never would have imagined, and that the road ahead was full of thorns, but also, in a strange and unexpected way, redemption. Now, as my great-granddaughter stirs in her sleep on my lap, I wonder if I did the right thing. Not for me, but for my children. And that's the question that has haunted me for 50 years. The cell was cold and dark, with a smell of dampness that stuck to your skin like a second layer. The cot where I slept had a mattress so thin I could feel every spring digging into my back. The other women looked at me with curiosity, some with contempt, others with a strange mixture of compassion and mockery. "The church lady," they called me, because in those first days I couldn't stop praying, clutching the small wooden cross that I had managed to hide among my clothes. I didn't know what had happened to my children. That uncertainty was worse than any punishment. I imagined Michael, with his 7 years, trying to be the man of the house, Sarah, 5 years old, trying to comfort little David, who was barely 3 and surely crying, asking for his mama, and Marcus. What had Marcus done? Had he awakened from his alcoholic stupor to take care of our children, or had he abandoned them as he had abandoned me? After 3 days I received my first visit. It was my sister Patricia, with eyes swollen from crying so much. She hugged me through the bars as if she wanted to merge with me. "The children are with me," she told me, and I felt my soul returning to my body. Marcus is gone, Evie. He left a note saying he couldn't bear the shame." I wasn't surprised. In some way, Marcus had been leaving for a long time, moving away from us a little each day. Now he had simply completed the journey. "How are my children?" I asked, clutching the bars until my knuckles turned white. "They're scared, confused. Michael keeps asking when you'll come back. I told them you were sick, that you had to stay in the hospital for a while." I appreciated the merciful lie. My children didn't need to know their mother was in jail. At least not yet. "And Mr. Thompson?" I asked, fearing the answer. "He's all right. The blow wasn't serious, but he's furious. Says he wants to see you rot in jail." I couldn't blame him. I had robbed him, attacked him. In my prayers, I asked forgiveness for what I had done, but deep in my heart I knew I would do it again if my children were hungry again. Days turned into weeks. I was assigned to the prison laundry. Hard work, but which I appreciated because it kept my mind occupied. My hands, which had always been soft despite housework, became rough and cracked from the soap and hot water. Every Sunday, Patricia brought the children to visit me. We kept telling them I was in the hospital, but Michael, always the most perceptive, began to suspect. One day, while Patricia was talking to a guard, he looked at me intently. "This isn't a hospital, is it, Mama? It's a jail." I felt as if someone had thrown a bucket of cold water over me. I couldn't lie to him. "Yes, son, it's a jail." "What did you do?" he asked with a maturity that broke my heart. "I did something wrong, Michael. I took something that wasn't mine." "Why?" "Because you were hungry, and I didn't know what else to do." He looked at me for a long time, as if he was deciding something important. Then he simply nodded. "You'll come back home, right?" "Yes, my love. I'll come back home." I didn't know when, but I was determined to keep that promise. The judge sentenced me to 2 years in prison. Mr. Thompson testified against me, describing in detail how I had broken into Steele and how I had attacked him with savage violence. It wasn't true. It had been an accident. But my word meant nothing against his. He was a respected businessman. I was a poor woman whose husband had abandoned her. Reverend Wilson, to my surprise, interceded for me. He spoke of my devotion, of how I sang in the choir, of how my children were always clean and well-behaved despite our difficulties. He asked for mercy. The judge listened, but the law was the law. 2 years. Life in prison had its own routine. I woke at dawn, had breakfast of watery coffee and hard bread, worked in the laundry until the afternoon, ate beans and cornbread, and then had a few hours to rest before they turned off the lights. Sundays were for church service and visits. Some inmates avoided me. Others approached me. I met Gloria, an older woman who was there for killing her husband after years of beatings. She took me under her protection, teaching me how to survive in that place. "Keep your head high, Evelyn," she would tell me. "Don't let them take away your dignity. It's the only thing they can't lock up." There was also Tammy, barely 18, who had stolen jewelry from the house where she worked as a maid, and Loretta, who had stabbed her boyfriend when she found him with another woman. We all had stories. We had all arrived there through desperate decisions or moments of madness that had changed our lives forever. Slowly we formed a strange family. We protected each other, shared what little we had. At night, when the guards moved away, we told each other stories of our previous lives, our dreams, what we would do when we got out. One day, 6 months after my arrival, Patricia came alone, without the children. Her face was pale and she was wringing her hands. "Evie, something's happened," she told me, and my heart stopped. "David is sick, very sick." "What does he have?" I asked, feeling the world crumbling around me. "Pneumonia. The doctor says he needs special medicines, but they're very expensive. I don't know how I'm going to pay for them." Patricia was already doing too much taking care of my 3 children in addition to her own. Her husband, my brother-in-law James, was a good man, but barely earned enough for his own family. "Have you heard anything from Marcus?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "Nothing. No one has seen him since he left." That night I didn't sleep. I thought about my little David, with his little body burning with fever, coughing in a bed that wasn't his, without his mother to take care of him. I remembered how, when he was born, I swore nothing bad would happen to him as long as I lived, and now I was failing that promise. The next morning during breakfast, I told Gloria about David. "I need to get out of here," I told her. "My son needs me." Gloria looked at me with sad eyes. She understood the pain of a mother separated from her children better than anyone. Her own children had grown up while she was locked up. "There's no way to get out before serving your sentence, Evelyn. Unless what? Unless you get a pardon. But for that, you would need someone with influence to intercede for you. And money. Lots of money. I had neither. The only thing I had was my faith and my desperation as a mother." That afternoon, when the prison chaplain came to give communion, I asked to speak to him privately. I told him about David, about my desperation. He was an older man, with kind eyes and hands that trembled slightly when he raised the host. "I'll do what I can," he promised me. "I'll talk to the bishop. He knows the governor." It was a remote possibility, but I clung to it like a lifeline in the middle of a stormy ocean. The following days were a hell of waiting and uncertainty. Patricia came daily to give me news of David. Sometimes he improved. Other times he got worse. The medicines were expensive, but my brother-in-law had asked for a loan, and they had managed to buy them. One night, while I slept restlessly, I dreamed of Jesus. He was standing by my cot, with his serene face and compassionate eyes. "Have faith," he told me, and I woke up with a start. The next day, I was called to the prison director's office. He was a stern man who rarely spoke directly to inmates. He looked at me over his glasses, evaluating me. "Mrs. Johnson, I've received a letter from the bishop interceding for you," he told me, showing me an envelope with the episcopal seal. "He says your circumstances were mitigating, and that you have shown true repentance." I couldn't believe it. The chaplain had kept his promise. "I've also received this," he continued, showing me another paper. "It's a letter from Mr. Thompson, withdrawing part of his accusation. He says that, after reflection, he believes the blow was accidental. That was even more surprising. Mr. Thompson, the man who had sworn I would rot in jail, was now interceding for me. "What does this mean?" I asked, hardly daring to hope. "It means, Mrs. Johnson, that your case will be reviewed, and that in the meantime, you are granted conditional release for humanitarian reasons. Your son is sick and needs you." Tears sprang from my eyes without me being able to contain them. I fell to my knees, thanking God, Jesus, the chaplain, even Mr. Thompson. "You can leave tomorrow," said the director. "But understand that this is not a full pardon. You will have to report every week to the judge, and any infraction will bring you back here. Is that clear?" "Yes, sir. Crystal clear." That night I said goodbye to my prison companions. Gloria hugged me tight. "Don't come back, Evelyn," she told me in my ear. "Do what's necessary, but don't come back to this place." Tammy gave me a small prayer card of St. Jude, patron of lost causes, which she had kept as a treasure. Loretta, more practical, gave me the address of her cousin, who had a soul food restaurant downtown. "Go see her," she told me. "Tell her you come from me. She'll give you work." The next morning, with the few belongings I had in a paper bag, I walked out the prison door. Patricia was waiting outside, with tears of joy running down her cheeks. "How's David?" was the first thing I asked. "Better. The fever has gone down. But he needs you, Evie. They all need you." The journey to Patricia's house was like a dream. The fresh air, the colors of the world, the sound of birds. Everything seemed new, more intense. When we arrived, the children were at school, except for David, who was sleeping in a small bed in the living room. I approached slowly, afraid of waking him. He was thinner, with shadows under his eyes, but he was breathing peacefully. I sat next to him and took his little hand in mine. Feeling my touch, he slowly opened his eyes. "Mama?" he said in a weak voice, as if he couldn't believe what he was seeing. "Yes, my love, Mama is here, and I'm not going anywhere." He hugged me with surprising strength for a sick child, and I hugged him back, silently swearing that we would never be separated again. When Michael and Sarah returned from school, the scene was repeated. Hugs, tears, promises. That night, we all four slept together in the bed that Patricia had given up for us, the children clinging to me as if they feared I would disappear while they slept. The next day, after breakfast, Patricia and I talked about the future. "You can stay here, as long as you need," she told me. "James agrees." "Thank you, sister. But I can't continue to be a burden. I need to find work, a place for us." "What do you know how to do?" she asked me, though she already knew the answer. "Cook, clean, wash, sew. What any housewife does. You could work at the church," she suggested. "They always need help with cleaning and cooking, and I don't think they'll judge you for what happened." The idea didn't thrill me. The church ladies could be strict, and the work would be hard for little money. But I wasn't in a position to choose. "I'll go talk to them tomorrow," I decided. But that afternoon, while I was helping Patricia with dinner, someone knocked on the door. It was Mrs. Jackson, the neighbor who had betrayed me. I tensed at seeing her, but her face showed no accusation, only shame. "Evelyn," she said, looking at the ground. "I've come to ask your forgiveness. I shouldn't have... I didn't know." "It's okay," I told her, though it wasn't. But I didn't have the strength to hold a grudge. "No, it's not okay. That's why I've also come to offer you something. My sister has a soul food restaurant downtown. She needs someone to cook. I've told her about you, about how well you cooked. She says you can come whenever you want." I was speechless. Mrs. Jackson, the woman whose words had sent me to jail, was now offering me a job opportunity. Why are you doing this? I asked. Because I know what you did was for your children. And because my husband used to beat me. One night I stuck a knife in his thigh. I could have been the one who went to jail. But no one ever knew. He said he fell at work. So, who am I to judge you? That night, while the children slept, I thought about Mrs. Jackson's offer. Downtown meant a new beginning, away from the accusing looks in the neighborhood, away from the memories of Marcus and prison. But it also meant taking the children away from their aunt, from their school, from the little that was familiar to them. And there was my conditional release. The judge had ordered me to report every week. If I went downtown, I would be violating that condition. I could go back to prison, this time for longer. It was an impossible decision, but I had to make it. For my children, for our future, for the promise I had made to myself on that prison cot, that I would do whatever was necessary so that my children would never go hungry again. With morning came clarity. I knew what I had to do, even if it was risky. I would go see the judge, explain the situation to him, beg if necessary. I would tell him I had a job opportunity downtown, that it was my only way to support my children, to be an honest citizen. And if he said no, well, then I would have to make an even more difficult decision. What I didn't know then was that the judge would not be the only obstacle in my path, that the past, like a persistent shadow, would follow me downtown, and that there, in that unknown place, I would find both danger and redemption. The judge received me in his office, an austere place with portraits of stern-faced men on the walls. He looked at me with tired eyes, as if he had seen too many stories like mine. I explained my situation, told him about the job offer downtown, about my children, about my determination to start a new, honest life. "Mrs. Johnson," he said after a long silence, "I understand your situation, but the law is clear. You must report to me weekly for at least 6 months. After that time, if your behavior has been exemplary, we might consider changing the terms of your conditional release." 6 months, I repeated, feeling the world crumble around me. "Your Honor, I can't wait that long. My children need to eat now. We need our own place to live." "I'm sorry," he said, though his tone showed no real compassion. "It's the best I can do." I left the courthouse with a heavy heart. 6 months, half a year living off my sister's charity, looking for odd jobs in a neighborhood where everyone knew me as the thief who went to jail. Half a year in which my children would continue to be pointed at, shunned by other children. That afternoon, as I walked back to Patricia's house, I passed by Mr. Thompson's store. To my surprise, he was at the door, sweeping the entrance. Our eyes met, and for a moment, I thought about continuing on, avoiding the embarrassment. But something stopped me. "Mr. Thompson," I said, approaching with hesitant steps, "I wanted to thank you for withdrawing part of your accusation. Thanks to that, they gave me conditional release." He looked at me for a long time, as if evaluating me. He was a heavy-set man, with a mustache that had grayed in the months I had been in prison. "I didn't do it for you," he finally said. "I did it because Reverend Wilson convinced me it was the Christian thing to do, and because your sister told me about your sick son. Still, I thank you." He made a gesture of indifference and returned to his sweeping. I was about to leave when he spoke again. "Is it true that you stole to feed your children?" The question took me by surprise. "Yes," I answered, not looking away. "There was no food in the house. Marcus had spent what little money we had on liquor. The children had been eating nothing but cornbread for 2 days. Mr. Thompson nodded slowly, as if confirming something he already knew. "My mother went hungry during the Depression," he said, surprising me with this unexpected confession. "My grandfather stole a sack of flour so they wouldn't starve. They put him in jail for 3 years." I didn't know what to say. It was the first time Mr. Thompson had spoken to me as a person, not as a criminal. "Come tomorrow," he said abruptly. "I need someone to help in the store. I'll pay you fair, no more, no less." And without waiting for my answer, he went into his store, leaving me stunned on the sidewalk. Working at Mr. Thompson's store began the next day. I arrived early before opening and cleaned the place. Then I waited on customers, organized merchandise, kept the books. It was hard but honest work, and I did it with a gratitude that sometimes surprised Mr. Thompson himself. The first weeks were difficult. Some customers refused to be served by me. Others whispered behind my back. But gradually the novelty wore off. People in the neighborhood had their own lives, their own problems. I was just another piece of gossip that lost interest over time. The children returned to school. David fully recovered from his illness, again becoming the happy and mischievous boy he was before. Michael, always serious, became the best student in his class, as if he wanted to prove to the world that being the son of an ex-prisoner didn't make him less valuable. Sarah, my little dreamer, constantly drew, creating colorful worlds where we were all happy. We continued living with Patricia and James, but now I contributed money for expenses. Slowly, we began to regain a normalcy that I thought was lost. Forever. Every week, punctually, I presented myself to the judge. I never missed, never was late. I told him about my work, about the children, about my plans for the future. He nodded, asked a few questions, and let me go. With time, our meetings became almost cordial. One afternoon, after 3 months working at the store, Mr. Thompson called me to the back room. I thought I had done something wrong, that he was going to fire me. Instead, he handed me an envelope. "It's a letter to the judge," he explained, "saying that you've been an exemplary employee, that I trust you, and consider that you've paid your debt to me and to society." Tears came to my eyes. "Mr. Thompson, Don't say anything," he interrupted me, uncomfortable with my emotion. "Just do your job and take care of your children." With Mr. Thompson's letter, the judge agreed to modify the terms of my conditional release. Instead of reporting every week, I could do it once a month. And most importantly, he would allow me to go downtown for the job at the restaurant, provided I reported to a judge there. It was more than I had expected, more than I thought I deserved. That night, on my knees beside the bed where my children slept, I prayed more fervently than ever, thanking God for this second chance. The goodbye to Patricia and James was painful. My sister cried, hugging me, making me promise I would write every week. The children were excited but also fearful. Downtown was an unknown place, far from everything they knew. "What if we don't like it there?" asked Sarah the night before leaving. "Then we'll come back," I promised, though I knew it wouldn't be that simple. Mr. Thompson drove us to the bus station in his truck. As he said goodbye, he handed me another envelope. "An advance for a job well done," he said, "so you can get settled." The journey downtown was long and tiring. David got motion sickness. Michael kept asking questions about what our new life would be like. Sarah fell asleep with her head on my lap. I looked out the window, watching as the residential landscape gradually gave way to tall buildings and, finally, to the urban chaos of downtown. Mrs. Jackson's sister's restaurant, Miss Bessie's Soul Food, was in a vibrant district, noisy and full of life. It was a small but clean place, with wooden tables and checkered tablecloths. Miss Bessie welcomed us with a warm smile that lit up her whole face. "Martha's told me a lot about you," she said, after helping us bring down our meager belongings from the taxi. "Says you cook like an angel." "My sister exaggerates," I replied, embarrassed. "I'll be the judge of that. Tomorrow you'll prepare the daily special and we'll see." The place where we were going to live was above the restaurant, a small apartment with 2 rooms, a tiny kitchen, and a bathroom. It wasn't much, but it was ours. That night, while the children slept, exhausted from the journey, I sat by the window looking at the city lights, so different from the stars that illuminated the sky of my neighborhood. I thought of Marcus, where he might be, if he ever thought of the children he had abandoned. I thought of the prison, of Gloria, Tammy, Loretta. I thought of Mr. Thompson and his unexpected kindness. I thought of all the road traveled since that afternoon when desperation had led me to steal. The next day, my new life began. I got up before dawn, woke the children, helped them get ready. We had breakfast together. I explained to them that they would go to the local school while I worked at the restaurant. "What if the other kids find out about what happened?" asked Michael, always concerned about how others saw us. "No one will know," I assured him. "No one knows us here. We can be whoever we want to be." My first day in the restaurant kitchen was a challenge. Miss Bessie watched me as I prepared the traditional dishes: fried chicken, collard greens, masa, and cheese, cornbread. The heat was suffocating, the pace frantic. But my hands seemed to have their own memory, moving confidently among the ingredients, remembering recipes that my mother had taught me and that I had perfected over the years. At noon, when the first customers began to arrive, Miss Bessie tasted each dish. Her expression was unreadable as she chewed slowly. "Well?" I asked, nervous. A slow smile spread across her face. "Martha wasn't exaggerating. This is real food, like my mama used to make." It was the highest compliment she could give me. From that moment on, I became the main cook at the restaurant. I worked from dawn to dusk, but the work was rewarding. Seeing customers, enjoy my food, hearing their compliments, knowing they came specifically for what I prepared, was a form of redemption I had never imagined. The children quickly adapted to their new school. They made friends, learned to move around the neighborhood, discovered the small pleasures of urban life, street vendors, the nearby park, sometimes the movies as a special luxury. Once a month, as promised, I reported to the designated judge. I showed him my papers, told him about our progress. After 6 months, he informed me that my conditional release had ended. I was free, completely free. That night we celebrated, with a cake I bought at the fanciest bakery in the district. The children blew out the candles with me, as if it were my birthday. "What did you wish for, Mama?" asked David with whipped cream on his nose. "I already have everything I wish for," I replied, looking at all 3 of them. And it was true. The restaurant thrived. The food I prepared attracted more and more customers, even from other districts. Miss Bessie was delighted and offered me a partnership. "I don't have money to invest," I told her. "Just my hands and my recipes." "That's more than enough," she replied. "Half the profits for you, half for me." And we changed the name. Evelyn's Soul Kitchen. How does that sound? It was more than I had dreamed. I accepted with tears in my eyes. The new sign was installed a week later. Evelyn's Soul Kitchen, in large red letters. Below, in smaller letters, food like Mama made. On the day of the inauguration with the new name, I threw a party for the whole neighborhood. I prepared my best dishes, hired a small jazz band, invited all the neighbors. Among the crowd, I saw a man watching me from a distance. Something in his posture, in the way he tilted his head, seemed familiar. When our eyes met, I knew who he was before. He approached. Marcus. He had aged 10 years in the 3 that I hadn't seen him. His face was gaunt, his clothes worn. But his eyes, those eyes that had once made me believe in love at first sight, remained the same. "Evie," he said in a hoarse voice, "I've been looking for you." I stood frozen, unable to respond. 1,000 emotions ran through me. Anger, pain, nostalgia, fear. Miss Bessie, who was nearby, noticed my expression and approached. "Everything all right?" she asked, looking suspiciously at Marcus. "Yes," I managed to say. "He's someone from the old neighborhood. Can you watch the kitchen for a moment?" Miss Bessie nodded, not quite convinced, and walked away. I took Marcus to a secluded corner, away from the music and laughter. "What are you doing here?" I asked without preambles. "How did you find us?" "Patricia told me where you were," he replied, lowering his gaze. "I went to the neighborhood a month ago. I wanted to see the children, know how they were." "Now you care about them," I said, and my voice sounded more bitter than I intended. "After abandoning us when we needed you most." "I know, Evie. I have no excuses. I was a coward. The alcohol, the shame. I couldn't look them in the face knowing their mother was in jail because of me." "Because of you," I repeated, and each word was like a knife. "Yes, Marcus, because of you. Because you preferred to spend money on whiskey while your children went hungry. Because you left when you should have stayed." Tears appeared in his eyes, but I felt no pity. I had cried too many tears over this man. "I've changed, Evie," he said, and his voice trembled. "I've been sober for a year. I work as a carpenter in Detroit. I have a small shop, I'm doing well. I came looking for you, for all of you. I want us to be a family again." I laughed, but there was no joy in my laughter. A family? After everything that happened? After I had to steal to feed your children? After jail, the humiliation, starting over from scratch? "I know I don't deserve it," he said, and he seemed sincere. "But the children, they deserve to have their father." That stopped me. I thought of Michael, who sometimes looked at other children with their fathers with a longing that broke my heart. Of Sarah, who still drew our family with a father figure, though she hadn't seen Marcus in years. Of David, who barely remembered his father, but who had once asked me, "Why don't I have a daddy like the other kids?" "The children are fine," I said finally. "We have a good life here. They don't need you showing up now to confuse them. I'm just asking for a chance, Evie. Let me see them. Let me try to be the father I never was." Before I could answer, I heard a voice that froze my blood. "Dad?" Michael was there, looking at us with huge eyes. He had grown so much that I hardly recognized the little boy Marcus had abandoned. Now he was a 10-year-old boy, tall for his age, with the same dark eyes as his father. Marcus stood motionless, as if he had seen a ghost. "Michael," he whispered, "my son." Michael didn't move. He looked at both of us, at his father and me, and I saw in his eyes a maturity that frightened me. "You came back?" he asked, with a voice that tried to be firm but betrayed his emotion. "Yes," Marcus answered. "I came back for you all." "Why now?" asked Michael, and his voice contained all the accusation that I hadn't dared to express. "Why not when Mom was in jail? Why not when David was sick? Why not when we needed you?" Marcus had no answer. He approached Michael, tried to hug him, but my son stepped back, rejecting him. "Michael, please," begged Marcus. "I know I made mistakes, terrible mistakes, but I'm your father. I love you." "A father doesn't abandon his children," said Michael, with the painful wisdom of someone who had learned too early about betrayal. "A father stays, no matter what." He turned and walked away, disappearing into the crowd. Marcus made a move to follow him, but I stopped him. "Leave him," I said. "He needs time." "And you, Evie?" he asked, his eyes bright with tears. "Do you need time too?" I looked at this man whom I had once loved with all my soul, who had been the center of my dreams, and then the cause of my nightmares. And I realized I felt nothing for him anymore. Not love, not hate. Just a kind of distant sadness, like looking at a faded photograph of someone you no longer recognize. "I've moved on, Marcus," I told him, "and so have the children. If you want to be part of their lives, you'll have to earn it. It won't be easy, and it won't be quick. And don't expect us to go back to being a family like before. That's over." "I understand," he said, and for a moment I saw the man he had been before the alcohol, before the despair. Can I see the other children? Sarah and David?" I hesitated. Part of me wanted to protect them, keep them away from this man who had caused them so much pain. But another part knew they had the right to know their father, to decide for themselves if they wanted him in their lives. "Tomorrow," I decided. "Come tomorrow to the house. We'll talk calmly, without all these people around." He nodded, grateful. "Thank you, Evie. I won't disappoint you. I won't disappoint them, I promise." Promises. Marcus had always been good at making promises. Keeping them was another story. That night, after the party, when the restaurant was closed and clean, I sat with the 3 children in our small living room. I told them their father had returned, that he wanted to see them. Michael already knew, of course, and remained silent, with his arms crossed over his chest. Sarah, who was now 8, reacted with a mixture of curiosity and fear. David, at 6, barely understood what it meant. For him, Daddy was just a word, an abstract concept. "Do we have to see him?" asked Sarah. "No," I replied. "If you don't want to, you don't have to. It's your decision." "I don't want to," Michael said immediately. "I don't know," said Sarah. "Maybe I do want to." David looked at me confused. "Is he bad?" he asked. How to explain to a 6-year-old child the complexity of an absent father? How to tell him his father wasn't bad, just weak? That alcohol had been stronger than his love for us. "No, my love," I finally answered. "He's not bad. He just made wrong decisions. But he says he's changed." "And do you believe him?" asked Michael, with that penetrating look that sometimes made me forget he was just a child. "I don't know," I answered honestly. "That's why I want you to meet him and decide for yourselves." The next day, Marcus arrived punctually, well-dressed, with a small gift for each child. For Michael, a set of miniature tools. For Sarah, a sketchbook with colored pencils. For David, a wooden top. Michael refused to come down from his room. Sarah accepted the gift shyly, not getting too close. David, curious and without the weight of memories, was the only one who showed openness, examining the top with interest, and asking Marcus if he knew how to make it spin. "Of course," Marcus replied, and for a moment I saw a flash of genuine joy in his eyes. "Would you like me to show you?" While Marcus and David played in the small yard, Sarah watched them from a safe distance, Slowly, curiosity overcame her. Reserve and she approached, first to see better, then to try to spin the top herself. I watched them from the window, with mixed feelings. On one hand, I was glad to see my children enjoying their father's presence. On the other, I feared Marcus would fail them again, that this visit was just a passing whim before disappearing again from their lives. Marcus stayed all afternoon. He played with the children, told them stories, asked about school, about their friends, about their lives. When it got late, he said goodbye, promising to return soon. "Where are you staying?" I asked, walking him to the door. "At a boarding house near the bus station," he replied. "Nothing fancy, but it's clean. How long will you be in town?" He hesitated before answering. "That depends. On you all. On whether you give me a chance. You can't just appear and disappear from their lives, Marcus. If you're going to be present, it has to be real. Long-term. You can't play with their feelings. I know, Evie. That's why I'm thinking about staying here downtown, looking for work as a carpenter, being close to them." The idea troubled me. Marcus living in the same city, being a permanent part of our lives. It wasn't what I had planned when we fled the neighborhood looking for a new beginning. "We'll see," was all I said. In the following weeks, Marcus became a constant presence. He came every afternoon after school, played with the children, helped them with homework. Even Michael, though initially resistant, began to accept his presence, first with resignation, then with cautious interest. Marcus taught him to carve wood, to use tools, things between men that I could never have shown him. Miss Bessie observed all this with skepticism. One night, after closing the restaurant, while we were counting the register, she asked me directly, "Are you going back to him?" "No," I answered without hesitation. "Never." "The children are getting attached," she warned. "What will happen when he leaves again? He says he won't leave. And you believe him?" It wasn't a question, but a statement loaded with doubt. "I don't know, Bessie. I want to believe he's changed for the children's sake, but you can't forget what he did," she completed. "It's not just what he did," I explained. "It's what he didn't do. He wasn't there when we needed him. He wasn't there when I had to steal to feed his children. When I went to jail. When David almost died of pneumonia. Some absences are impossible to forgive." Miss Bessie nodded, understanding. "Just be careful, Evelyn. For you and for the children." One Sunday, Marcus invited all 4 of us to spend the day at the park. It was the first time we went out together as what had once been a family. The children were excited, especially David, who had never been to the famous park. It was a beautiful day. We walked through the gardens, had a picnic under the trees, ate ice cream. The children ran and laughed. Marcus chased them, pretending to be a monster who wanted to eat them. I watched them, trying not to be carried away by the illusion of normality that Marcus was carefully building. At sunset, while the children played near the fountain, Marcus sat next to me on a bench. "Thank you for this day, Evie," he told me. "It's been so long since I felt like this, at peace." I didn't respond. The words got stuck in my throat. "I know I can't erase the past," he continued. "But couldn't we try to build a future together? For the children?" "The children are fine, Marcus," I replied, more sharply than I intended. "We've built a life without you. A good life." "I know, and I'm glad for that. But think about what it could be if we were together again. A complete family." "Like the one you abandoned?" I asked, and I couldn't prevent resentment from coloring my voice. The one you left when it needed you most? I was a different man then, Evie. The alcohol, the desperation. I'm not justifying myself, just trying to explain. Now I'm different. I fought my demons and won. I looked at him, trying to see beyond the pretty words, trying to discover if he had really changed or if this was just another of his empty promises. I need time, Marcus, I finally said. The children too. You can't expect us to forget everything that happened overnight. I understand, he said, and he seemed sincere. I'll wait as long as necessary. I'm here and I'm not going anywhere. That night, while the children slept exhausted after the day at the park, I sat by the window looking at the city lights, as I had done so many times since our arrival. I thought about Marcus, about his promise of change, about the possibility of reconciliation. Part of me wanted to believe him. I wanted to think that the man I had fallen in love with had returned, that we could rebuild what we once had. Another part, the one that had learned to survive alone, the one that had built a new life from the ashes of the previous one, resisted. That part reminded me of jail, hunger, shame, the daily struggle to keep my children fed. What I didn't know then was that fate was about to make the decision for me, in a way I could never have imagined. 3 days after our outing to the park, Marcus didn't show up at the usual time. The children were waiting for him, especially David, who had prepared a drawing to show him. When it got dark and Marcus still hadn't arrived, I put them to bed, telling them he probably had to work late. The next day, he didn't appear either, nor the next. On the 4th day, worried despite myself, I went to the boarding house where he was staying. The owner, an elderly woman with kind eyes, looked at me with compassion. He left 3 days ago, she told me. Paid what he owed and took his things. Didn't say where he was going. I felt a mixture of anger and sadness so intense that for a moment I couldn't breathe. Marcus had once again done what he knew best: disappear. Just when the children were beginning to trust him. Just when I was beginning to wonder if there could be a future for us. How would I tell the children? How to explain that their father had abandoned them for a second time? I returned home with a heavy heart, rehearsing in my mind the words I would use. But upon arriving, I found a man waiting at the door. It wasn't Marcus, but a stranger with an official look, worn suit, and a briefcase in hand. "Mrs. Evelyn Johnson?" he asked, consulting a paper. "Yes," I replied, with a bad feeling. "Who are you?" "I'm from the city hospital. I'm afraid I bring bad news. Marcus Johnson has suffered a serious accident. He's asking for you and the children." The hospital was a maze of white corridors, antiseptic smells, and fluorescent lights that made everyone look sicker than they were. I followed the man through endless hallways, my heart beating so hard I could hear it in my ears. The children had stayed with Miss Bessie. I didn't want them to see their father in bad shape before I knew the severity of the situation myself. Finally, we reached a ward where several patients were separated by curtains. The man led me to the last bed, where a figure lay motionless under white sheets. At first, I hardly recognized Marcus. His face was swollen, with bruises ranging from purple to greenish yellow. A bandage covered part of his head, and his left arm was in a cast. "Marcus," I whispered, approaching. "What happened to you?" He slowly opened his eyes, as if it cost him an enormous effort. Seeing me, he tried to smile, but the smile turned into a grimace of pain. "Evie," he said in a hoarse voice. "You came." "Of course I came," I replied. And I was surprised to realize it was true. Despite everything, I couldn't have stayed away, knowing he was hurt. "I'm sorry," he murmured. I didn't want... It wasn't my intention. What happened? I insisted, taking his good hand in mine. An accident. I was working on a construction site. I fell from a scaffold. Something in his tone made me doubt. Were you drinking? I asked, fearing the answer. No, he said, and the firmness in his voice convinced me. I swear I wasn't. I've been sober for over a year. It was an accident, really. A rotten board. No one's fault. The doctor who approached the bed confirmed his version. Marcus had suffered multiple fractures, a concussion, and internal bleeding. They had to operate on him urgently. Will he recover? I asked. The doctor made that ambiguous gesture that doctors make when they don't want to give false hope, but don't want to alarm unnecessarily either. It's too early to tell. The next 48 hours will be critical. The internal bleeding is controlled for now, but with traumas like this, there's always risk of complications. When the doctor walked away, Marcus weakly squeezed my hand. The children, he said. Where are the children? With Miss Bessie. I didn't know how you would be. I didn't want to scare them. He nodded, understanding. You did right. But I want to see them, Evie. Just in case. He didn't finish the sentence, but I understood what he meant. In case he didn't survive. I'll bring them tomorrow, I promised. Now rest. I stayed with him until he fell asleep, watching his battered face, remembering the handsome young man who had made me fall in love at the church revival so many years ago. Life had taken us down paths we could never have imagined, and now, when it seemed our paths might join again, death lurked like a shadow. Upon returning home, I found the children waiting anxiously. I explained about the accident, softening the details, telling them their father was hurt, but that the doctors were taking care of him. Can we see him? David asked immediately. Tomorrow, I promised. Now he needs to rest. That night, after putting the children to bed, Miss Bessie was waiting for me in the kitchen with a cup of coffee. I sat across from her, physically and emotionally exhausted. How is he? She asked. Bad, I answered honestly. The doctor says the next hours are critical. Miss Bessie nodded, thoughtful. And if he doesn't make it, what will you do? The question took me by surprise. I hadn't thought about that possibility, hadn't wanted to think about it. I don't know, I admitted. The children have just gotten to know him again, and now I don't know how they would handle losing him again. They're strong, like their mother, said Miss Bessie, with a look that contained more than her words expressed. The next day I took the children to the hospital. I had warned them about their father's appearance, but even so, the impact was evident on their faces. Michael, always the most stoic, maintained his composure, but I saw how he clenched his jaw. Sarah began to cry silently. David, surprisingly, was the bravest, approaching the bed without hesitation. Does it hurt a lot, Daddy? He asked, with that direct sincerity typical of children. Marcus smiled through the pain. Not so much now that you're here, champ. We spent the afternoon at the hospital. The children told him about school, about their friends, about their games. Marcus listened attentively, as if he wanted to record every word in his memory. When it was time to leave, Marcus asked for a moment alone with me. The children said goodbye, promising to return the next day. Evie, he said when we were alone, there's something I need to tell you. His tone alarmed me. What is it? If I don't make it through this, he began, but I interrupted him. Don't say that. You're going to recover. Listen to me, please. If I don't make it through this, I want you to know that these last months have been the happiest of my life. Being close to you and the children, trying to be the father and the man I should always have been. It's been a gift I don't deserve. Tears sprang from my eyes without me being able to contain them. Marcus. Let me finish. I know I hurt you a lot, you and the children. I know I was absent when you needed me most. I don't expect you to forgive me, but I want you to know that I regret it every day, and that, whatever happens, I love you. You and the children. I've always loved you, even when I was too lost to show it. I didn't know what to respond. The words got stuck in my throat, mixed with tears and years of resentment that suddenly seemed less important. Rest, was all I could say, kissing his forehead before leaving. That night I didn't sleep. I thought about Marcus, about his words, about the possibility of losing him just when I was beginning to recover him. I thought about the children, how it would affect them. I thought about myself, about feelings I thought were dead, but now stirred like embers fanned by an unexpected wind. At dawn the phone rang. It was the hospital. Marcus had had a complication during the night. He was in intensive care. We should come as soon as possible. I didn't wake the children. I asked Miss Bessie to take care of them and ran to the hospital, my heart in my throat. Upon arriving, I was informed that Marcus had suffered a brain hemorrhage. They had operated on him urgently, and now he was in an induced coma. Will he survive? I asked the doctor, the same question I had asked the day before, but now with a tone of desperation I couldn't hide. We've done everything possible, he replied. Now it depends on him. His body has suffered a severe trauma. The next 24 hours will be decisive. They allowed me to see him in the ICU. He was connected to so many machines that I could barely distinguish his body among the cables and tubes. I sat next to him, took his inert hand in mine, and prayed as I hadn't prayed in years. Don't go now, I whispered. Not when we've just found you. The children need you, Marcus. I need you too. It was the first time I had admitted this, even to myself. Despite all the pain, the betrayal, the abandonment. A part of me still needed Marcus, not the man broken by alcohol and desperation who had abandoned me, but the Marcus I had known at the church revival, who had promised me eternal love, the father of my children. For 3 days, Marcus remained between life and death. I divided my time between the hospital and the children, trying to maintain an appearance of normalcy for them, while inside I was consumed by anguish. Miss Bessie took charge of the restaurant, allowing me to be with Marcus as much as possible. On the 4th day, when I was about to lose hope, Marcus opened his eyes. It was only for a moment, a blink, but the doctor said it was a good sign. His brain was responding, fighting to recover. Gradually, day by day, Marcus improved. First they were brief moments of consciousness, then longer periods. He began to recognize us, to speak with difficulty, to move the fingers of his good hand. Each small progress was celebrated as a miracle. After 2 weeks in the hospital, the doctors said he could go home, but he would need constant care. He wouldn't be able to fend for himself for some time. He might never fully recover the mobility of his left arm. He can stay with us, I said, without thinking twice. We have space. It was true, though barely. Our small apartment above the restaurant had 2 rooms, one for me and one for the children, but we could manage. The sofa in the living room could be converted into a bed for Marcus. The children received the news with enthusiasm. They had been visiting their father regularly at the hospital, seeing his slow recovery, worrying about him. The idea of having him at home, of being able to take care of him, seemed perfect to them. Miss Bessie was the only one who expressed doubts. "Are you sure, Evelyn?" she asked me privately. "Having him at home, taking care of him, after everything that happened?" "He's the father of my children," I replied, as if that explained everything, and in a way, it did. The day Marcus arrived home was like a small event in the neighborhood. The neighbors, who had followed his story through us and through Miss Bessie, looked out their windows or came to their doors to see him arrive, supported by a cane, with his arm in a sling and his head still partially bandaged. The children had prepared welcome signs. I had cooked his favorite dish, fried chicken with mac and cheese and collard greens. Even Miss Bessie, despite her reservations, had helped prepare the sofa to make it as comfortable as possible. The adaptation wasn't easy. Marcus needed help for almost everything. Bathing, dressing, sometimes even eating when the pain in his arm was too strong. The children collaborated in what they could, especially Michael, who seemed to have overcome his initial resentment and now showed an almost adult concern for his father. I divided my time between the restaurant, the children, and Marcus. The days were exhausting, but there was a strange satisfaction in them, a sense of purpose I hadn't felt in years. One night, after putting the children to bed, I found Marcus awake on the sofa, looking out the window at the city lights. I sat next to him, exhausted but happy to have survived another day. "Thank you," he said simply, taking my hand. "You're welcome," I replied, and I meant it. "I know it's not easy for you, having me here, taking care of me after everything that happened." "The children are happy," I said, as if that were enough explanation. "And you?" he asked, looking me directly in the eyes for the first time in a long time. "Are you happy, Evie?" The question took me by surprise. It had been so long since anyone had asked about my happiness that not even I had questioned it myself. I had been so busy surviving, taking care of my children, building a new life, that I hadn't stopped to think if I was happy or not. "I think so," I replied after a moment of reflection. "I have the restaurant. I have my healthy and safe children. I have a roof over my head. It's more than many can say." "That's not happiness, Evie. It's survival." His words bothered me, perhaps because they contained a truth I didn't want to recognize. "And what do you know about happiness, Marcus? Were you happy when you abandoned us? Were you happy at the bottom of a bottle? As soon as the words left my mouth, I regretted them. It wasn't fair to attack him like that, not when he was hurt, vulnerable, trying to rebuild his life and our relationship. "I'm sorry," I said immediately. "I shouldn't have said that." "No, you're right," he replied with a calmness that surprised me. "I don't know much about happiness, but I know about its absence. I know what it is to lose everything and realize, too late, what you had. I know what it is to wake up every morning with an emptiness in your chest that no amount of alcohol can fill." His words moved me. For the first time, I saw Marcus not as the man who had abandoned me, but as someone who had suffered as much as I had, though in a different way. "What do you want, Marcus?" I asked, and the question contained many more. "What do you expect from me? What do you expect from us? What will happen when you recover?" "I want a second chance," he answered without hesitation. "With you, with the children. I want to be the husband and father I should have been from the beginning. I want to show you that I've changed, that you can trust me." "Trust isn't rebuilt overnight," I told him. "It's earned with actions, day after day. And once broken, I know, and I'm willing to earn it again for as long as necessary. I'm not asking you to love me again, Evie. I'm just asking you to let me try." I looked at him for a long time, this man who had once been my whole world, and then had become the source of my greatest pain. And I saw something in his eyes that I hadn't seen before. A serene determination, a maturity that suffering had carved in him. "All right," I finally said. "You can try." From that moment, something changed between us. It wasn't love, not yet, but it was a beginning, a common ground where we could meet. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months. We built a life together, with its difficulties and its joys. Marcus recovered, returned to carpentry, became the father the children deserved. I continued with the restaurant, which prospered more each day. We never forgot the dark days, the hunger, the desperation that led me to steal, the humiliation of jail, the constant fear. But we learned to see them as part of a journey that had brought us here, to this place of peace and fulfillment. Now, as I sit in this rocking chair, with my great-granddaughter sleeping on my lap, I look back at a life full of ups and downs, mistakes and successes, losses and gains. A life that began in the south side of Chicago and took me down paths I could never have imagined. Was I happy? Yes, in my own way. I had love, I had family, I had purpose. Do I have regrets? Of course. We all do. But when I look at my children, my grandchildren, this precious great-granddaughter sleeping peacefully on my lap, I know it was worth it. Every tear, every sacrifice, every moment of desperation and hope. And sometimes, on the quietest nights, when I'm alone with my memories, I can almost hear Marcus's voice whispering in my ear. "You did well, Evie. You did well." And I know, deep in my heart, that I did.
Thank you for listening to this story. If it touched your heart, make sure to subscribe to our channel and stay with us for the next story. It's already waiting for you on the screen. Because every story told by a grandmother carries the strength of generations. Click and keep listening. We'll be right here.